Welcome and bienvenidos to our new program called Next Generation, highlighting the many creative journeys of next generation leaders. In this series, I will bring you the stories of young leaders in science, literature, medicine, education, and business. Those who have chosen to reach further, travel farther, innovate, and take the risks often necessary to make a difference in their own lives, in those of their families, their communities, and someday in the world. My name is Julieta Garcia. For over 22 years, I had the great privilege of serving as president of the University of Texas at Brownsville. Through that work, I came to know the stories of many of our students that overcame great obstacles to attend college and through great sacrifice of their own and of their families, make it through. Getting to know their stories was always a great inspiration to me. So I thought I'd chase some of them down, interview them, and let you hear in their own words what they're up to now, what their challenges were, and what they hope to accomplish in the future. I promise you will be as inspired, amazed, and humbled by their accomplishments as I have been. Now let's get started. We have the great privilege today of interviewing Karen Lozano, Dr. Karen Lozano, a professor at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, who is in mechanical engineering and who has patents and who has been mentoring students and has been teaching classes and really developing a new awareness for the role of women in mechanical engineering, especially Latina women. So welcome to our program, Karen.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. I enjoyed going to your campus the other day and to your lab. It was fascinating to see some of the equipment that you have available for students. But before we get into what you're doing right now, let's go back a little bit and talk about the journey that brought you now to where you are as a professor. You grew up in Monterrey, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And growing up in Monterrey, how in the world did you get the idea in your head that you wanted to be an engineer?
That's a very good question. So I think I had always somehow been attracted to math and physics. So when it was time to decide on what to study, I was kind of inclined to do architecture or graphic design or industrial design, and also mechanical engineering. But I somehow knew that engineering wasn't for girls, so not a lot of girls were there. So I told my mom that I was maybe going to do industrial design because engineering wasn't really for girls. And she told me that if it was written anywhere that girls were not allowed in the field. And I said, well, it's not written, but you go to the university and you're not going to see girls. So we actually went and visited some of the universities, and there were basically no girls. So so my mom then, very smart women, my mom. So she said, well, but if it's not written, why do you have to follow the herd, right? Why can you just do what you want or what you think, is good? And I thought engineering was good it was a good, okay, so back then I was kind of in charge of my family, so I think it was going to be a good way to provide for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And it had the prestige and not much that I wanted, but I thought it had the opportunity to grow. So I decided that then, through my mom convincing me, I said, well, why not? Let's give it a try.
Now, you decided to go to a school that was a private school in Monterrey. Is that right? Because they had a few more girls in the school. Is that right, for engineering?
Well, they have a few less boys. Let's put it that way.
That's a better way of putting it. Thank you.
That's a better way of putting it because I was the only girl. So.
Oh, you still were
So,
the only girl there, but they just had less men in the class.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So in the other schools, they had like maybe 300, in a class, or maybe 50, but mine were like 20 in a class. So, and I was the only girl. When I entered my first semester, there was one finishing her 9th semester, so she was graduating, and then from there was no girls in all the other classes. And then when I was in fifth, so in my sophomore junior year, there was a girl that came in, but she stayed only for her freshman year, and then she dropped out. So there was basically, when I graduated, there was also no girl. So I was the only one, not only in my class, but in the whole program at every point that I was there for the 4.5 years.
Now, that's
So
extraordinary. And this was the Universidad de Monterrey, is that right?
yeah, that's correct.
Yes. And so once you finish there, I mean, already making it through many hurdles as the only girl in class and really against all odds in many ways, but with support of your mother and your father, then how did you end up going from there to Rice in Houston?
So when I finished, I was looking for a job, and it was very hard to find a job because, all the jobs were mostly for men. So only men were allowed to apply. So you could see the ads that said, we're looking for a mechanical engineer, sex male. So I said, well, we have a big problem in here. So, then around that time that I was unemployed, two professors from Rice University traveled to my university trying to start an outreach program, and I was encouraged to apply. I had done my senior design project on reinforced polymer composites, and I was already taking exams like the GRE and the TOEFL to join or to apply to universities, and I was inclined to do some quality control or statistics. And when they visited, they convinced me that maybe material science or to continue on mechanical engineering. So I remember them saying, well, there's a lot of statistics in material science. So I applied together with another one of my colleagues, and months later we received a letter that we had been accepted. So that's how I ended up at Rice.
And how did you know anything about Rice at that time? Did you know what kind of a wonderful and magnificent school you were about to attend?
I feel bad, but I knew nothing about it. I just knew the professors, the two professors that visited, and but nothing else. So when I found out, I actually found out it was a wonderful place, but I really didn't. I guess scared to ask much about it. I just went in and started working like crazy. And through the months that I was there, the only place that I would go outside of the university was to the grocery store. And while being at the grocery store, people will ask me, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a student at Rice." And they will look at me and say, "Oh, you must be really smart." And I'm like, "Oh man, that's what I'm finding out, that I'm not that smart."
So tell us a little bit. Were you now married by this time, or were you single still?
No, I was single, so I
Okay.
married a year after I went to Rice.
All right. And your husband is an engineer as well?
Yes, he's a chemical engineer.
Right. And so then he went to join you in Houston?
Yes, so when we married, he went with me to Houston, and I guess as a chemical engineer, we thought it was going to be easy for him to find a job in Houston, but it was very hard for him because he had a degree from outside of the United States. So it was extremely hard. So he applied to many places and no calls and nothing. So we decided just to remove the chemical engineering degree from his resume, and just go and apply because. So he was applying to companies and they were saying no. So then he said, well, maybe I'm gonna go and apply to restaurants as a waiter. So he went to restaurants, and then restaurants will look at him funny. It's like, you're a chemical engineer and you want to serve tables, So there's something weird with you. So they will not giving him a job also. So we decided we'll just remove the degree, right? And then just say you're a high school dropout. And then he's like, okay. So then he went to Blockbuster, and they hired him. So he started cleaning, restrooms and vacuuming and all of that, until they kind of saw that maybe this, he seems to be having some potential. So he looks a little educated. So they put him on the register, and then soon they wanted him to be the manager of the store. But then he was working the night shift, so like at 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. So it was hard, but I guess, as we tell our students, not you have to go through a lot to, to grow, and it doesn't really matter if you start. There's not a point for you to start that you say, oh, I have to start as the boss. You can start anywhere, and you're gonna grow fast.
So those first years there at Rice must have been very difficult for you now, because you were receiving some sort of scholarship from Rice, weren't you, to go to school?
Yeah, we had a stipend, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a very small stipend. So, but it was, I think, good enough to pay rent and to pay gas, so insurance. So, but we had no furniture. We had just like a blanket on the floor and things like that. And we didn't want to, go in depth with anything. So, we were living with what we had.
That's very admirable, because you also mentioned to me that you were trying to help out back home and send some of your money, some of your stipend, back to the family so that they could provide for themselves during that time.
Yes, so it was sending mm, all. It was about half of my stipend, so it
Mm-hmm.
was very hard. So we had like about $25 to eat a week. So our date, I guess, every weekend was a cone, like an ice cream cone from McDonald's. There were two for $1, and that was all we could afford.
You don't forget those things, do you? You don't forget the amount of
No.
dollars exactly that things cost when you have so little to spend on what you would consider a luxury.
Yeah, like when I traveled to Monterrey, one time I went by plane and on my vacation from Rice, and I remember I was starving, and I went around the airport looking for something to eat, and everything was so expensive. So I bought a banana, and I paid $1, and I remember I can buy 3 pounds of banana for
Oh.
$1, and I'm buying, just one banana for $1. So.
Oh. Those are hard stories. They're real, but all of us have gone through that, and it's good for students, I think, to hear that their professors, even their esteemed professors of mechanical engineering, have gone down that path themselves. So then you're now at Rice, and you have some furniture after a couple of years in your apartment, and you start doing very well. You went from a master's to a PhD from Rice University in mechanical engineering. That must have been just, I mean, there had to be moments where you thought, is this real? Is this really happening to me? Is it this extraordinary journey? Were there ever moments when you thought you couldn't handle the pressure and the work, or were you confident all the way through?
No, the whole time I was just doubting everything. So, I guess I really never had the time to think that oh, this might be like a dream and this is a great. I was just so stressed out the whole time that I just like, okay, I just have to live through the day, one day at a time, and I just have to go one day at a time. And I never really had time to enjoy. So I remember when I went and turned in my master thesis to the graduate office. I turned it in, and I came out of the office crying, and I was just crying so badly, all the way through the mechanical engineering department. And my husband was with me, and he's like, "But why are you crying? You just finished. You should be very happy." And it's like, I don't know, it was very hard. So there were like those were the hardest years of my life, I guess. But if I were to do it all over again, I'll do it all over again. It's totally worth it.
Well, we're very fortunate for us that you survived those difficult years, not only in Monterrey, but also in Houston, and were able to graduate from one of the best schools in the nation in mechanical engineering. So now you're there, and you've graduated from Rice, and you have to decide what to do with this wonderful degree that you have. How did you end up at UT Pan Am at the time, now UTRGV?
Well, you're probably the only one that knows the story. So now I guess more people
Now
will
more
know the
people will
story.
know.
So, well, you're not the only one. I'm pretty sure Dr. Lemaster knows the story too. But so we were driving to a wedding to Monterrey, one of my husband's classmates. And it was in the middle of the summer. And back then, the university, there were not a lot of classes in the summer. So the engineering building was basically empty. So we're driving down on 77, and then, the 77 to 81, I guess. So we're driving down on 281, and then we see an ad that says University of Texas Pan American. And I knew about McAllen because as living in Monterrey, you come shopping to the United States. So I knew about McAllen, but I had no idea that there was a university in here. So we're driving down, and then we see the ad, and we're like, oh, there's a university. Let's let's see, and let's stop by. So we did route it and went through University Drive and park, and then walked to the engineering building. It's like, oh, they do have an engineering building. So we came in the building, and as soon as we opened the door, Dr. LeMaster is passing by, and Dr. LeMaster, back then he was the director of engineering, or he was in charge of the 3 engineering programs. There were not departments; there were programs back then. So we just crashed into him, and then he says, he said, "Oh, can I help you?" And it was my mom, my husband, me, and my son, and he was 2 years old. So definitely we didn't look like students. So he just said, "Sorry, can I help?" And we were like, "Oh, sorry, we don't want to intrude. We just saw engineering and we thought we could go in." And he's like, "Oh, definitely, you can come in. So who are you?" So we introduced ourselves, and then he introduced himself and he said, "Let me give you a tour of the building." And he was, as always, he was the, nicest person, always trying to grow the program and always fighting, I guess, for the good of the university and the students. So he took the time to take us around, and he showed me the labs, and I was like, wow, this is a great building, this is great labs. Then he showed me labs upstairs, and he said, well, these labs are empty, but when we hire faculty, they will fill them up. And the labs downstairs, there was a materials lab, and I'm like, oh, they have a lot of instrumentation. And for me, I said, like, this is like a hidden treasure in Edinburgh, because they had a lot of equipment that I was using at Rice, but they had it like kind of scattered through the university. And here they had, in one particular lab, they had a lot of equipment that I was using. So I was like, oh, this is so amazing. So that we spent like maybe 40 minutes with him. So then he says, he gave me his card and said, just can you send me your resume when you go back? And it's like, yeah, sure. So we can stay in contact. And I said, yeah, sure. So that's it. We left the wedding, and then we went back to Houston. And then I sent him my resume. And like a week later, I received an email saying, thank you for applying, but the position has been filled. And I'm like, I didn't even apply, but okay, whatever. So I received my first rejection letter without even applying. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So then that was like June something or July something. And then like in September, the first week of September, one day I go into my office and I have a message with the secretary of the department, and I have a message with my advisor, and I had a message with in a voicemail that I needed to contact UTPA. So I call, and then they say, oh, how are you? And it was a Tuesday. And they say, how are you? We would like to offer you a job. Can you start next Monday? And I'm like, what? I haven't even applied. And so we had a professor that was hired, and he couldn't make it last minute. So we want to offer you a job. And I said, okay, but I guess, long story short, I said, well, I haven't even interviewed. And they said, well, yeah, you were here and you interviewed. And I'm like, well, yeah, but not really.
So did my son and my mother and my husband.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was like, oh, I guess it was a little weird. So then they said, can you come for an interview? I said, yeah. So they flew me on Thursday. So I flew with my baby, and my mom met me at the airport. So we traded. I gave him the baby, and then I went to the university. And so that's it. Then they wanted me to start next Monday, and I said, no, I can't. So we kind of went back and forth until they say, okay, Provost has given us permission for you to start in January. So then that was when we decided, okay, what should we do? My husband was finishing his master's in December, and then he said, well, just take it. I guess that's a good opportunity. They want to do they want to start doing research. And they said they will support you, so take it. So that's how I took this opportunity. It was a little weird.
That's a wonderful story about Dr. LeMaster and how important a role one faculty member can make in recruiting diversity in their faculty, and diversity of extraordinary kind, woman, Mexicana, Latina, and someone from with a PhD from Rice. And so I wanted to make sure we captured that story so that other students understand that it's not always quite so neat a road that lies before us. Sometimes it takes twists and turns, and we have to be ready for that opportunity. So then you decided to come down, accept the position, and you've been now there at UT, Pan Am, now UTRGV, for how many years?
Well, I started January 2000,
Okay.
so
So you've been there about
18
18
years
years.
and a half.
And
Yeah.
that's a wonderful career to have there. And while you've been there, you've been teaching, but you've also been publishing. You've been doing, you've been getting grants. You've received a couple grants, big grants from National Science Foundation. My information says that you've got one for 2.7 million, another one for 3 million, all with the intent to help open doors for other students. Tell us a little bit about the grants that you've received and what the purpose of those grants were.
So yes, when I started, I guess a lot of people think that, as I said, they wanted to start doing research, but they were still not prepared. So we were still teaching 4-4 every, like 4 classes in the fall, 4 classes in the spring, and still, trying to get some funding so I could do research, because that was what I guess my passion was. And or not really, I guess passion, it gets confused a little bit these days, but that was what I knew I could do, to help others. And then so I my working hours, or I was working like 100 hours a week, so teaching the 4 classes and then doing a lot of work or the proposal writing at night at my house. And I received several grants. I guess a lot of people back then didn't even know what it was. When I first received the career award, it was like $400,000. And I remember some staff from the college, they will say, "Why are you still working? You already got $400,000. You could leave." And that's a lot more than your money. You already made several years of your salary. And I'm like, okay, well, that money is not for me. That money is for the students, it's for the university. So and you had to kind of educate a lot of people back then about what grants were. And so then the grants that I receive are to give opportunities to students. Sometimes what we see is that the best way to retain students and to help them graduate and to encourage them to do well is if we involve them in a research project where they start feeling ownership, where they start relating what they're learning in the class to what can be applied into real life, where they start feeling that they can contribute to state-of-the-art technologies. So that's the best way to engage a student. So that's been my fight, I guess, through the many years. And what I found is that even though I enjoy being in the lab, I started slowly being taken away from the lab so I could be writing more grants to help more students. And then indirectly, well, not indirectly, but basically in my office, learn what they're doing, and then have visit them in the lab once in a while. But there's now, I guess, the role of what I do has been shifted a little bit to make sure that we provide as many opportunities as possible to the students, and then don't lose them in the way. Still, provide projects and engage them in the process. And we've seen that several hundreds of students have already worked on the grants that I have written, and they're enjoying very good lives. I'm very happy to see them moving forward. I'm very happy to see them getting awards or moving into graduate degrees, graduating with masters, graduating with PhDs. And many times students that never really thought, just like me, right, never really thought that they could enjoy, education as much as they have done it, and or that they could be working, in different companies throughout the world. I guess that's what brings the everyday pleasure to my job, and that's the fight that I want to keep on fighting, provide as many opportunities and keep on helping students graduate and enjoy, the fruits of what they have been or harvesting, the fruits of what they have been working for.
I think you make a very, very many important points, but one of them has to do with with what happens with grant money when you get it. It doesn't go to the professors. Oftentimes we think, well, they can sit back and relax, just like you said. In fact, that's when the work just begins, because you have to figure out how to best use those dollars to leverage other dollars, or to get the right kind of equipment to help your students, or to provide opportunities for them with learning how to get patents, for example, as you have done, or to start their own company. So thank you for explaining all of that. I think that's a really important part of what the research does at a university that we fail to communicate more clearly to our broader community. So now, students, you've
Yeah.
got. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So yes, one thing. Many times I said, just give me 3 classes or 4 classes. And my life will be a lot easier. Because
That's
as you
right.
said, you have to do the accounting, you have to do the report to the agency. Then once you get grants, then you're called by the agency to be a reviewer, for other grants for other people. You have to do the annual meetings. And then, of course, you have to be working with the students, on a daily basis. And now, when we have a team of, in the whole, right now the center has like over 60 people participating, you get to know most of them. And it's, not all of them work directly for me, but you have to be, an administrator for basically everybody and the mentor. And you have to write, tons of letters of recommendation, right? And so, yeah, it is a full-time job. So sometimes it's easier to teach your 3 classes and then, do a good job in the teaching.
Well,
But
you've never followed the easier path, so we
no,
would not expect you to do that now. So since then, since having graduated as the first Latina to ever earn her PhD in mechanical engineering from Rice University, you've also been lauded as the Engineer of the Year by President Obama, is what I understand. Got to meet him, go to the White House, and you started your own company called Fiber Rio. Is this work that you're going to be doing in terms of getting patents and starting companies, that you see that continuing on along with your instructional responsibilities?
yes, I think we can do that again. It's a very good opportunity to help students, and it's a very good opportunity to impact more people. So definitely, we are looking forward. We are developing now new materials and new ways to do, I guess, the same materials, but cost effective or greener methods. Or so yeah, definitely we will like to continue on that innovation entrepreneurship path.
So, Karen, we're about to wrap up our interview, but I wanted you to think for just a moment that I've got 100 students here in front of you, and they want to hear some words of wisdom. What consejos, what would you tell the students that you think are most important for them to hear from someone who began where you did, who had a tough transition for all of the reasons that we've talked about and more, and who's done so well in her career? What kind of consejos or words of advice would you give our students?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. Um, well, okay, so what I always tell the students is that if I were to give them 3 things that will make their dreams come true, or will suggest 3 tips, one will be hard work. Uh, there's no way to climb the ladder if you don't go step by step, and you have to do it. There's no other ways. If they go, these days people go to high schools and very successful athletes or industry owners, and they go and the first thing they tell them is just pursue your passion, do what you want, make sure that you have fun every day. And I think that's the wrong message that we're giving to the youth, because those people that are telling that to them, they have gone through a lot to get where they are. And when you tell somebody, make sure that everything comes easy to you. Make sure that, then we're not giving the right message. The right message is that work hard. It's gonna be painful. You're gonna cry sometimes. You will have to go through a lot of sacrifices, but it's worth it at the end. So pursue an opportunity and put all the passion in that opportunity. But don't pursue a passion, because what's a passion for them at this age, right? So So it's an emotion, and it can change from
Sure.
day to day. So one thing is hard work. That they understand, that they need to understand that to get there you have to work. Then the other thing is personal responsibility. So I say that if you keep on blaming others for what's happening to you, you're never going to be able to change the direction of where you're going, because you keep on thinking that it's everybody else's fault. So it's your parents, it's your teachers, it's the government, it's the politicians, it's the administrators. So if it's everybody else's fault, you're never going to be able to pivot or change the direction of where you're going, and then you're gonna get nowhere. So hard work, personal responsibility, and the third one I will say innovation. Make sure that you think different. Don't go through the traditional way of doing things. Always sit back and analyze what you're doing and think, is there a better way to do things? And you can do that. You don't necessarily have to be in the STEM field. You can be in your house, and there's you don't like the way, I don't know, you don't like the way toothbrushes work. Well, think of a different way to to do it. You don't like the way something. I'm still thinking every day. I think of a self-cleaning kitchen, but I haven't found that answer.
Let us know.
But,
Let us know, Karen, when you get there. You'll have many customers for it. Thank you so much. You've been so wonderful to give us so much of your time and your candor and your good advice. Te agradecemos bastante. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to get to know you.
El placer es mío. Gracias.
Hasta pronto. Thank you for tuning in to Next Generation, a program highlighting the next generation of leaders in the Rio Grande Valley and beyond.